Hi everyone, I'm the Plant Propagator and welcome to my channel. Today I am so happy to be in Irvine, California. There's no orchids around me, but there's this guy who is just full of orchids. So I am so pleased to be able to share with you.
People say I'm full of something else, but it's okay.
I'm able to share with you Joe. This is Joe Arditti, and if you don't know him, these are two of the many books that he's written on orchids.
Now this one is edited.
Okay, all right. Well, he was the editor of these books on orchids, but we've taken a look through his. So we're at his house, and I've taken a look at his library, and it's really an incredible collection of orchid books. Some of which he wrote and edited, but a lot of the books are from other sources, different languages. Incredible collection, but also the knowledge. So Joe spent his career, Dr. Arditti spent his career at UC Irvine. Has a very colorful past, but he's one of the few academic professors. He's professor emeritus at Irvine, and he's one of the few faculty who spent his career working on orchids and orchid research. He is a orchid physiologist. I was reading a review article on the plane coming here on orchid physiology, and he was referenced a lot in that book. So I'm just really happy to be here, and I'm happy to share Joe with the YouTube audience. And what I wanted him to do is just share some of his orchid wisdom, and we've been talking for a couple hours today, and I think we've barely scratched the surface. It was interesting how much we have in common. The more we talk, the more I realize how much we have in common. But just, an incredible career that keeps on going. He's not writing or editing very much anymore, but still an incredible background in the orchid area. So I don't know, Joe, if you could tell the audience, maybe how you got into orchids, what got you started on it, and then there's a few specific things that we talked about that I need to ask you about also.
When I was an undergraduate, I needed a job. And one of my professors at the university, I shall not mention because the USC rival,
okay,
got me a job with a very wealthy orchid grower in Bel Air, California. He told me the guy needed somebody to help him with his orchid collection. He had mostly cymbidiums, but a greenhouse full of phalaenopsis. And his name was Anton Kofranik. And I said, Dr. Kofranik, what is an orchid? So he said, well, I better show you because I told the guy that you're an expert. So he took me to the greenhouse and showed me a Cattleya, he showed me a cymbidium, and he said, these are orchids. Now, I told the guy to ask you some questions so he can prove that you are an expert. So here are the answers to the questions. And so I went to the guy, and he said, I hear you're an expert. I said, yep, I am. And so he said, can I ask you some questions? And I said, sure. He asked me the questions that Dr. Kofranik gave me the answers to. I passed with flying colors,
Great.
Of course.
Yeah.
And he hired me. He wanted to pay me $1 an hour. That was in 1955 or 56. And I said, as an expert, I deserve $1.50. So he paid me $1.50. And I worked for him. And when he eventually sold the house and his wife died and he was living on his own by the time I got my doctorate from the University of Southern California. And he was one of the first people I called. And he said, gee, that's surprising, Joe, because when I first met you, you didn't know an orchid from a dandelion. You didn't get fooled.
These good guys are like that, yeah.
Yeah, he He was on his last legs. He died 2 or 3 months after I called him.
Oh my gosh. Okay. All right. That's too bad. All right. So one of the questions that I asked that I thought I would bring up again is we were talking it's background in orchid physiology, but we were talking a little bit about genetics and breeding. Mm-hmm. And because this is one of the things that I'm interested in, I think the audience is interested in that. As far as knowing the genetics and what cross you're going to make, what is your philosophy on that? Is it well defined, or what approaches should we be using?
I think that you don't have to know genetics to breed orchids. I think you don't have to know genetics to bring any ornamental the way the people do it. I don't know about commercial plants, about commercial crops like corn or soybeans and so on. You get 2 plants that you like. That's what these people do, really.
Okay.
They get 2 plants that they like, and they say, gee whiz, it looks nice. They cross them. And then you get anywhere between 10 or 15 or 20,000 seeds to maybe 4 million seeds in a seed capsule. And then you germinate, I don't know how many thousands of them. And then you grow a few hundred seedlings, and some of them bloom. And so these few orchids are so heterozygous that anytime you cross, you will get some unbelievable variety. And a few of them are going to be outstanding. And so you're going to show them to people, and what breeders normally do, they show them to people and say, gee whiz, I knew that if I took X and bred it in Y, they're going to give me this, because they give you all the genetics, if they understand it, if they know it. Most of the time they don't. But they didn't play a role in a choice. They backward explain it to him.
Yeah.
I think that if you like to breed orchids, just go and cross any 2 orchids you want and hope for the best, and you're probably going to get something nice.
That is great. That's what I do. That is great advice. One other thing, I got to bring something else up that we didn't talk about. You corrected me. I remember this just very clearly when I think I mistakenly referred to the structure that forms after pollination as a pod. And you got aggressive with me.
I get aggressive with everybody. Pod, by definition, are produced only by legumes.
Okay.
I think the family Leguminaceae doesn't exist anymore.
No, it has
a different name now.
Yeah, and I don't remember what it is. And I should know because I'm a soybean guy. I should know.
I forget now. It's just
Fabaceae,
or
something like that.
Whatever. And so they only produce pods. I don't remember the exact definition now, but what orchids produce is a capsule.
Okay. And I tell these guys, and because people still call them, they're still called the green pod. They're still calling pods. They're not. This guy he was aggressive with me.
With everybody.
But I'm still here. I still came and visited him. And
that's because I gave him good lunch.
It was a great lunch. So some of the other things that just so I want to explain background in seed physiology. But also so if you have questions about seeds, this is the guy that knows about it. Seed recovery. As far as I asked him previously. There was he published an article on seed storage in orchids that where the seeds were stored under very defined conditions, which were what again?
Yeah, well, let me tell you what happened is I got my job at the University of California, Irvine in 1966, and I retired in 2000 or 2001. And all those years, from the very beginning, I gathered seeds because we did experiments in seed germination, and for a while we even worked on the native orchids of California. And, maybe 10 years before I retired or something like that, I looked at my refrigerator in the crisper section, and I had so many vials of orchid seeds stored the way you're supposed to store them, which is you put them in a test tubes with a screw cap on, you put calcium chloride, On the bottom, you put a little bit of cotton to separate the seeds from the calcium chloride. Then you put the seeds in a small vial, or not at all, and you put them in. I had a huge amount of seeds. I said, here's an experiment only an old man can do. And I had several students, and we tried to germinate some pretty old seeds. And we found out most of them germinated. But just to put it in context, the first person who studied the effect of aging on orchid seed germination that I can think of right off the bat was Knudsen, and he had seeds in his desk drawer. And they were not even in a refrigerator, and he gets.
And they did okay.
Yeah, they did okay. So orchid seeds, they didn't 100% germination, but they did germinate. So orchid seeds are pretty tough.
Yeah.
They can survive for a long time.
Okay. All right. So, and then the other things that we talked about in some major chapters in these books are on pigments, orchid pigments.
Yeah,
and we talked about that a little bit. And so the different different classes of pigments that are there. We don't want to talk about how they separate them, but you specifically we mentioned yellow ones. We mentioned the pink and reds and purples and things like that. So I don't know if there's any type of interesting pigment stories, and we didn't really talk about.
No,
I'm sorry.
The red and pink and purple and so on are usually anthocyanins, which is the molecule consists of a component called anthocyanidin, and which is attached to a sugar, and that's why they're water soluble. The yellow pigments are either water soluble flavonoids or non-water soluble, lipid soluble carotenoids. When I first came to the University of California, they gave me an empty room with some old junk equipment. They said, here is your lab, now you start working, you better produce some papers or we're going to fire you. So I used what I had in my first several papers from UCI or on the anthocyanins of some orchids.
Okay.
It was really a very complex procedure at the time. Now there is much nicer equipment, you don't have to do all that hard work. So it's interesting, and I don't think anybody's ever done the genetics of it. I think orchids are way too complicated, too heterogeneous to be able to do any genetics with them because you never know.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So one of the things is that you've talked a little bit more about your travels and where you've been. So you've been all over the world. You've got orchid colleagues everywhere, and I'm a little jealous, but it's kind of amazing that you've been so many different places. The library that you have here is phenomenal, and you mentioned that the books are in. There's some that are English, but French. We saw French, German, and you've got some in Asian characters. I saw.
Yeah,
too.
I can't read them, but I can look at the pictures.
Okay, all right.
I like to travel. I spend most of my time in Singapore, Malaysia, and Indonesia. I think my absolute favorite when it comes emotionally is probably Indonesia. I love Indonesia. I love the people. I love the food. The Indonesian food is probably the best in the world as far as I'm concerned. I like Malaysia too, but my favorite all around is Singapore. It's an amazing country.
Okay.
And I have some very good friends there, and we did some research and published.
Okay, all right. So we're gonna change gears completely because I just thought of it, and that's how I kind of do things. In these books and in general, the things we talked about anatomy, and you also told me that because I love working in the lab, but you told me you have two left hands.
Yeah, that's right.
In the lab. So a lot of stuff that I love to do, you said that you had other people doing them and you enjoyed the writing and the thinking and things like that. But there's a lot of histology and we talked about anatomy and there's a lot of histology. Did you do any histology?
No. Very little. Very little. In the books, the Orchid Biology series, which is ran into 12 volumes and had to stop due to age, most of it is not written by me. It's chapters that other people contribute. And I just edited the books, and if there is histology and anatomy, it's done by the people who wrote the chapters. In a very few cases, we did a little bit of it, and I was lucky to have had students or postdocs or technicians who had right hands who can do it. And then they do it, and as you'll see, my philosophy always was that if anybody did work, they got their name in a paper. So if they see a paper on that includes anatomy and histology, the other people on there, the one who did the actual back-breaking labor, I was just the guy who did the thinking and the idea and the direction and so on.
Yeah. Okay.
But they cut it and they sectioned it and
they did that stuff.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So I didn't want to go, and I told Joe ahead of time I didn't want to go too long. Normally he would keep on going, but he's kind of we're kind of minimizing the amount just to make sure that we're good. I told him I would come back and visit. If you've got questions that you want to ask, I can pass some of those on to him, but I can also come back and visit and talk about that at another time too. But
you can come anytime. If I'm not mistaken, there is an empty room upstairs.
All right. And I met his dog. I fell in love with his dog. Is just great. It took him a while to warm up to me, but now I think we're good.
Yeah, my dog's name is Troy because got my degree at the University of Southern California, the well-known famous Trojans.
Yeah.
So I named my dog Troy. It's
right.
Troy 2. Troy 1 died a few years ago.
All right. But Troy he's full of team spirit or something else like that. All right, that's all I have for today. I hope you liked the video. If you did and you want to keep on seeing them, it would help me out if you can click on like, share, and subscribe to my channel if you're not already a subscriber. All right, that's all I have for today. Again, I hope you enjoyed meeting as much as I did. Meeting for me in person the first time, Joe Arditti, and this is a great and a legend in the orchid world. All right,
just an old man.
Again, I hope you enjoyed today's video and happy propagating.